the change in letter writing to technological communication has shifted the relational understanding of what gratitude looks like and what it means. Welcome to With You Podcast. I'm David.
And I'm Tara, and we talk about relationships and life transitions.
Yeah, and today the relationship we're going to talk about is with technology. Technology shifts that have altered the way we communicate.
Ooh.
Yeah, sounds fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
There are. I mean, we have lots of skills and lots of things that interact in our lives technologically that affect relationships, affect communication.
Yeah, and this is where we feel like dinosaurs because we've seen...
Well, speak for yourself.
Okay, I feel like a dinosaur.
Okay, and I'm the thing that you find after the dinosaur died, and
The fossil? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep, that's me.
Yeah, so we're feeling a little bit left behind in some of the technology, and that maybe is what sparked this conversation, partly because I think you were thinking about sort of things in our lives that used to be essential skills that became obsolete.
Yeah, because we spent a lot of time growing up learning a lot of things, and now they're gone.
Right. Things we thought we'd teach to our children that aren't even things anymore.
That's right. Or we mention them and they're like, what are you talking about?
Right. And things are moving fast.
They are. I mean, it's remarkable when we start talking about these things to see just in our lifetime. I mean, we haven't gone back to the 1900s. I mean, the things we're talking about are maybe back to the 60s and 70s.
Right. And we kind of want to focus on why these advances in technology maybe have changed relationships and changed the way social dynamics work and work habits and interpersonal relations.
Because I think a lot of times the advances are done to try to foster better human connection and better productivity and better.
Yeah. And then there's unintended consequences.
Yeah, both on kind of how we relate, how we think, work.
Well, we've identified 7 that we want to talk about. So we're just going to this is supposed to be kind of a fun, playful
we hope it's fun
look at technology. It might just be a sad look into our past.
Yeah.
But we hope it'll be a fun way to think about just how the things that advance in life actually change maybe even the fabric of our society and communication.
And I think given that we're talking about communication, I think the first one is telephones.
Yeah. The good old telephone.
The old telephones. And I don't know, you grew up all over the place, so I'm not quite sure what the original phone looked like for you. In my house, we were in a small community that early in my development growing up, we had a party line.
Are you serious? Like you still had party lines?
Yeah, our neighbors would be on the phone and like, when are you going to get off?
So explain what a party line is, because I think of that as being like in the very earliest days of the invention of the telephone, which I think they were in homes by the 1920s or so, telephones.
Okay. Maybe some homes.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it reached Western Michigan for a while, but a party line, I mean, it's the kind of phone where you see the lady or guy sitting at a big desk where there's little holes that they're plugging in.
The switchboard.
Yeah, the switchboard, and they're connecting like, oh, you want to connect here? And I take it and plug it in.
Well, they still had that in, the TV show Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. She was a switchboard operator. So that was supposed to be in what, the
1940s, 50s? Yeah. And I remember my mom talking about that. Her telephone number was like Cherry Hill 549 or something like that. And she'd pick up the receiver. The operator would say, hello. And she would say Cherry Hill 549, and they'd connect it to whatever.
So the whole neighborhood shared a line, basically.
So for us, the neighborhood, there was like one phone line everybody was tapped into, and you'd pick it up and there'd be a dial tone or there wouldn't be, and you never know who's listening.
Right.
And so the phone wasn't really private.
No, there's a dynamic right there.
Yeah, the social, like the community, in my community, that's all these things. It felt that way. It felt like everybody knew everybody's business. We were all there were always secrets, but there wasn't the kind of privacy that is today. It was community knowledge.
So is it fair to say you could pick up the phone intentionally just to hear what was going on?
Yeah, you try.
That's going way back. I never experienced a party line, but I do remember our telephones that were the dial. What do you call the rotary dial?
Yeah, the
phones.
rotary
Yeah.
dial.
So
You push the number in a circle and you go,
yeah.
and then you do it again.
So there was a circle with you put your finger in a hole according to the number, and you'd have to go all the way around if it was a 9.
It makes me laugh because we're trying to explain this because we have these conversations with our kids. Like those of you that are in your 40s and 50s, you know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Everybody else is like, we're trying to paint a picture for you.
Right. So yeah, it was a landline, and I think some people still have landlines. It's anchored to. It's anchored. It's
To your wall.
permanent.
Yeah.
It lives in your home, and it doesn't go with you. And the line, actually, the telephone cable goes from your home out to the line on the street.
Yeah, and it may be above your house to a pole, or it may be underground.
Right. So the way that was different relationally for me, like my stories were, when I was a teenager and you'd have a friend call you, you'd want to be connected to your friends, and they would know your landline, which there was one in our house, there was one telephone.
Yep.
And it was in the dining room / living room, kind of where everybody would be hanging out. So the phone would ring. Somebody would have to answer it, somebody in the house. And maybe if you knew you were expecting a call, you'd make a run for the phone to try to be the one to answer it.
So like if a boy was calling?
Yeah. That's a good point, because if a boy was calling to ask you out, he had to be pretty brave, because he'd often have to talk to your parents first.
Yes. Hello, young man. What is your intentions with my daughter?
Right. And there was an etiquette to how you answered the phone. And in my house, we were not allowed to pick up the phone and just say, hello. You had to say, hello, Barnett residence. This is Tara speaking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So sometimes people thought it was a business and hung up.
Did that happen a lot? Like boys calling and your parents would pick up and then
No,
there'd just be clicks?
No, they would talk to my
Really?
parents, and because that was expected. That was just how it worked. I mean, some people maybe had a private phone in their room, but I did not.
Yeah.
So it was a good test for how strongly somebody wanted to speak to you. So, but of course, everybody knew if a boy was calling you. All my siblings were around, and Tara got called by a boy, and they'd all stand around and hear at least one side of the conversation.
Oh, did you ever? I did this. I got into the closet. They had the long cords on the phones.
Curly cords too.
And they get tied up, but you could go. I would hide in a closet.
Yeah, you got to find privacy somehow.
Yeah,
and I'm sure it was semi-private.
It didn't help.
No, I'm sure it didn't. Yeah, and I mean, those were still in effect when we started in college. There was one phone in the dorm room, and it had that long curly cord. You could take the receiver a fair distance from the phone, the base of the phone.
Yeah.
So my roommate was often up late, and she'd take it out into the hallway, but then she'd be sitting out in the hallway with the cord, going under the door. Yep. And so people just knew what was going on with other people a lot more.
And you had that, but you have to navigate your relationship. Like if you and your roommate were going to call home on Sunday afternoon, you'd have to negotiate or have a discussion. I mean, this is kind of how technology helped in our social skills, because I know my roommates and I, we'd have to try to discuss what time would we reach and what time did our parents want to talk to us, and time zones, and we'd have to negotiate. Right.
Yeah.
And
that has changed with the.
You have it in your pocket.
Right.
Well, before we get to pocket, did you ever wear penny loafers and have like dimes in your shoe?
I did wear penny loafers, but I didn't save actual money in them.
I had in each shoe I had a dime for a payphone. If there was an emergency, I'd have enough money for a payphone call.
See, I only remember payphones costing $0.25.
Oh, well. I lived in the outback.
But even payphones, I think they still exist, but it's a lot harder to find them.
Yeah.
So if those of you, if you have never used a payphone in the public somewhere, sometimes on a sidewalk or something, you'll see a telephone that's for public use, and you used to have to put a coin in it to
And it
make
was
a
in
call.
a box. So if you think about Superman, where he changes his clothes
right, yeah.
is a payphone box,
Yeah.
a phone box.
And the iconic red boxes in London.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'd have to use coins, or if you didn't have coins, did you do this? You do collect calls or reverse calls?
I know, I did not.
Oh, okay. So I learned a lot of skills that
Yeah.
are totally useless now.
Yeah,
But
I lived in Africa for part of that time you're speaking of. I was probably sending smoke signals.
fair. So the collect call is you'd pick up and the operator would be there and they're like, deposit money, please. And I'm like, I need to make a collect call because I don't have any cash and I need to call. And you needed to use coins. And so they would call and they're like, state your name and we'll let you go. So I would usually make up a name that was the information that I needed to communicate to my friends. And they would say, are you willing to accept a collect call from Meet at the Mall? And my friends would say no, and we'd meet at the mall. But you'd say David Van Dyke, and my parents would accept the call. So they would pay on their phone bill.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. My parents would not have enjoyed seeing those extra charges.
No. But now we're moving into the late 20th century.
So we were trying to remember when we first had our cell phones. And it wasn't until almost all of 4 of our children were born that we even had our first cell phone.
It was the early 2000s. I mean, I got a Palm Pilot for a kind of calendar organizer before I had a cell phone. And I think the cell phones we had were those, what do you call those? You push the numbers a couple of times to get different.
The T9.
The T9s,
keyboard.
That's right.
Where we had to hit
9
the,
numbers.
the number 3 or 4 times to get to the letter you were looking for. It took a long time to type a short message. Yeah, and that changed things a lot because the landline now, it used to be people would call the whole home and they'd be calling both of us. Now, it also reduces accountability because people could call you, people could call me, people could call the children when they got old enough to have cell phones, which we were late adopters of that.
That's right. And your manners, right? You had your own phone, so you didn't have to answer the family. Hello, this is the Van Dykes. This is David speaking. How may I help you?
Although I still hold on to that. When I answer my own cell phone, I still say, hi, this is Tara, because sometimes you just hear hello and you wonder if you've gotten the wrong number, Yeah. I don't know. I like to know who I'm speaking to before I start kind of going into it.
Yeah. So we had parenting, we navigated marriage, we navigated cross-country trips without cell phones and needing to find these old skills to be able to communicate and go a long time without communicating.
Right. I think that was a big thing that's changed too, because you couldn't just reach anybody whenever you wanted to. No. So you didn't feel like you were always reachable
under surveillance.
Right. Like speaking of the payphones, when we were teenagers without cell phones, if I was somewhere that I wanted to stay later than my curfew or the agreed upon time, I had to find a payphone and call my mom and say, is it okay if I stay another half an hour or whatever? And that in itself was difficult and challenging and required, or I'd have to ask my friend's parents, can I use your landline and call my mom or.
And all of that's about interacting with our environment versus I have my own resources that I can deal with. You have to navigate, find it, use it.
Right.
And I think parents had to tolerate a lot more ambiguity. Like I think back, I was gone like a whole day and my parents had no idea where I was. There was no way to contact me until I'd wander home for dinner.
Yeah, there was no texting to say, where are you?
And it's kind of nice. It's thinking about it was a freedom that I had. But I think as parents, I'd have a hard time picturing that with our kids.
Well, we lived with that for a while. Our kids didn't have cell phones until they were
in their early.
Yeah. So when they were younger than their teenage years, if they'd be at a soccer game, if I was running late to pick them up, I'd be panicking because I couldn't text them to tell them, mom's going to be 10 minutes late.
Yeah.
Wait at the field, So you had to, sometimes you had to, like you said, live with more ambiguity. Yeah. There wasn't instant communication or information.
And I do think that fosters some help, that optimal frustration that we talk about developmentally of like needing to tolerate not knowing, which is a lot harder now. And then in the 2000s, we moved into smartphones.
Yeah, and smartphones changed everything. We were talking about this before, and it's kind of like those big moments in history that you can remember where you were when these things happened. I remember exactly where I was when I saw my first iPhone. We were sitting
where were you?
I was sitting on 7 Gables Field. Saturdays we were there all day for serial soccer games, and I remember the person and what she was showing us on her phone, and a bunch of us were around her like, what are we seeing? She was swiping photos, like going through, and nobody had seen anything like that before. The touch screen, the ability to take photos and then like swipe through, it was just mind-blowing.
Yeah, you're living with aliens.
Yeah.
But when was that? Like when did the first iPhone come out?
I mean, I'm not great with dates, but I think it was around 2007 that the very first, I don't know what year I saw this one. It must have been
close to
2007. Yeah.
Our kids, that's about the right age for our kids. And but so that's not that long ago. And now we have iPhone 15. And
you can't imagine life without it now.
Like so much. Like I just learned, you know what I just learned to do with my smartphone?
Oh no, what did you learn?
I learned how to put my credit card on and use it as money.
I know.
You saw that.
That's dangerous.
You were not really happy.
You can just tap your phone and pay for anything now.
I know. I started to just want to buy stuff to tap it because it was really kind of fun.
Well, that's the big leap too, that we went from even just having a phone on our person to a phone that does everything, that can, that is our computer and our life holder and our,
So just a thing about computers. And then we'll get on to our next one. But like in grad school in 1994, I was in grad school and I had to do statistics. I was doing some research. I would input the data and I would have to wait 24 hours for my 8088 computer to run the stats. And hopefully I typed it in right because it would be 24 hours before I'd have the data. It took that long to run.
Yeah.
And now our computers in our pockets are so much more advanced.
Right.
It is a good tool. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I like my smartphone.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we love our smartphones. And as you'll see, the theme in all of these things we're going to talk about mostly is the speed at which we access everything, and how that changes
and
things.
And the relational changes that happen because of that. So why don't we go to the second one that we have?
Yeah. So I was just kind of thinking about how we communicated with our friends when we were teenagers. And in high school and junior high, there was a lot of note passing.
Oh.
So a lot of, you'd pass a note to somebody who would pass it, down the line in the classroom to whoever it was intended for. And, there's a few things about that since I don't know if that actually happens. I don't really think it does much anymore. The handwritten note that gets passed. Yeah. And what did you call those things that you put your, I'm acting it out.
Foursquares, I think.
Foursquare or fortune teller.
Pick a color and you'd tell you who you would date or something.
Right. So it was a folded piece of paper. Everybody knew how to make, and you would ask somebody to pick a color and then you'd
go GREEN.
Yeah. And then pick a number, and then it would lead you to some pre-written, thing about who you might like, or, some fortune telling kind of thing. But those were really commonplace because it was a way to play with people. It was a way to pass information. And I don't think that happens anymore. I think it's moved, that way of communication or communicating about people because there's also the talking about your friends or talking about people in school. And it's all become a lot more public. It used to be, you'd see people whispering about somebody in class, and a certain group of people would know something and everybody else would be on the outs. And I think that's changed in a big way, having gone to social media as the way that teenagers, maybe it's even beyond that now. I don't know. The apps change so fast.
Yeah. And now you can text in secret, or you can. So there's this more, again, privacy. And I'm not against privacy, but I think it's a more isolating thing that's different that we see. And social media, I don't get it.
You don't get it?
No, I try to, because this will happen. I try to post something and to like you or to other people, and it goes to everybody.
Oh, well,
And yeah, it's a user error. I totally understand that, but it's funny because students at school will be like, "Huh, you really didn't want that to go out to everybody, did you?" And I'm like, "Am I that transparent?"
it's not really meant for private communication that much.
No, and that's a difference as well. Like,
Yeah.
social media is not privacy. It's
Right. I think it makes anonymity easier,
oh yeah,
which makes it easier to just post, inappropriate things or unfavorable things about somebody that everybody sees, and then the person who did it doesn't have to pay the consequences of kind of hurting somebody.
yeah. It's the recipient that ends up paying the consequences. So, yeah, let's go back to note sharing and passing. No, I just mean like historically.
Oh, let's go back to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and on the same, this is almost kind of like the same thing, but different. The letter writing. I think letter writing is becoming a lost art, really. And I think there's a lot of value and a lot of beauty to letter writing. And that was part of our early relationship.
Yeah, you remember those blue air forms? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we shared a lot of those. I like that because I think it was intimate more and had to be more thoughtful and delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
It is a little embarrassing reading them now.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It's for all
I've got them
posterity.
tucked away somewhere, and they'll stay there until our grandchildren or somebody finds them.
Oh man, I was such a cornball.
Yeah, but I mean, the way people communicate with each other now isn't more private, I don't think. It's, you would, instead of letter writing, what has replaced that? Would you say it's email? That's even becoming a little less common.
Yeah, texting, brief texting. I mean, I think for us, the early time, so you were overseas and I was writing you, and it would take weeks
Right.
for it to get to you, and then you would respond. So it could be like the thoughts that I had were 2 weeks old before I had any response back. And there's also the beauty, like I loved getting a letter from you because it wasn't just the content, it was your handwriting, the cursive beauty. So there was a beauty in the note as well as the content in the note. And I think that's changed.
Yeah. I think that was some of the things I was going to say about letter writing too, is that it's so personal to understand what somebody's handwriting looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And often we don't really see each other's handwriting anymore because it's all digitally done. But I remember very vividly what both of my grandmothers, I could recognize their handwriting in a heartbeat because they lived long distance from me. And we wrote each other letters sometimes, or I'd get birthday cards. And my parents too. My parents would write me letters. I would know their handwriting from anybody's if you lined it up. And I think that's becoming a little bit obsolete because we don't need to write each other. Do you remember when pen pals were a big thing? Did you ever have a pen pal?
I did have a pen pal. We had to do that in third grade.
Yeah. So
remember
a
that.
pen pal was, you'd get matched up with somebody maybe in another country, and you'd write letters back and forth just as a means to get to know each other. Somebody you probably would never meet in person.
Yeah. Mine was an international exchange that our teachers set up. And yeah, because you'd learn about the world, you'd learn about other kids' traditions. It was really fun. And the anticipation, again, I'm back to anticipation.
Right. So it's partly it was a slower pace of communication. So there was that waiting, and you don't know if another letter's coming back to you. And then it arrives in the post. The postal service is now a place that we get junk. We don't get a lot of,
Yeah.
what we call now snail mail because it comes so slowly. And part of, along with the letter writing, I think, is the art of thank you notes. That's another thing that I know that kids that we know in our neighborhood still do that for wedding gifts and things like that. But thank you notes were expected and part of what you learned how to do. And you wrote thank you notes for all of your birthday gifts. And, it wasn't just the act of sending a note, but it was the art of learning how to write down your gratitude and say it in a personal way to people. And I think that's not done in the same way anymore.
No, and it's the thoughtfulness of it takes some time, and so there's a thoughtfulness to it, and it must be difficult, especially for people that's their love language. Notes and written kind of gratitude is their love language. I think about our families. It tends to be the older generation than us, aunts, parents, that's really, really important to. We realize that, but our kids don't. So the change in letter writing to technological communication has shifted the relational understanding of what gratitude looks like and what it means.
Yeah. There's something really beautiful in the intentionality of receiving a letter, right? Like somebody could be really grateful for something you do for them or a gift you give them, and they could say thank you in a nice way verbally. But it's really different to just be home a week later and get a handwritten note in the mail that says more than just, hey, thanks for that gift card or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah. So the intentionality, the time, and maybe just even the art, the intimacy of it.
And it's shifted to what's replaced that?
Email,
texting.
Yeah.
And I have this thought about you, and it's really quick, and I put it down, and then I can move on from it. And so there's not this permanence either that I think is present.
Yeah. Yeah. So bring on the letters. And just a note to anybody under the age of, 30, people, in our generation really
it's meaningful.
Appreciate notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, really meaningful. And it might not mean anything to you, but it's a way of connecting, speaking someone else's love language.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's our next technology shift? That's
one of my favorites. Dating.
No. Dating.
I think dating is, and I think we have some interesting stories about dating. Why don't you tell me about your dating experience?
Oh, well, dating you, I assume that's what you mean.
Yeah, only about dating me. But it was about asking people out. So dating was, again, a personal thing.
I think the big shift kind of comes from like the personal face-to-face, ask somebody out or call the landline and be brave enough to talk to somebody's entire family, to a very much more impersonal, either texting somebody to ask them out or just using dating apps and really not even knowing the person before you ask them out. So I think that we've shifted into a much less personal and maybe community-based way of even meeting somebody that you want to date.
But I think the culture has shifted so much, there isn't that anymore, even if the desire for that is there to kind of meet individually or personally, unless you're in your church or other places. It tends to be technology based now.
Yeah. And I think as you were saying that about where people meet each other now, I think a shift that goes along with this is the shift out of the workplace that maybe came more with COVID, because I think people used to have workplace romances, used to have friends there that would maybe set them up with people, mutual friends. And there's a lot less people going to the office for work now. So the work community isn't there. The going for dinner after work or whatever isn't happening. People are at home. And so where are you going to have those relationships that lead to kind of your dating or romance?
It's a lot harder. It feels more isolating. And I don't know, I think I'm biased, so I have to be careful about that, but it feels that way, and it's a little more impersonal.
Yeah. So for me, when I think about this, because fortunately for us, we met each other and got married before this shift happened. You did ask me out in person.
Yeah.
We didn't even have cell phones. So we had that relation. We had a friendship before we started dating.
Yeah, we knew each other pretty well.
Right. And I think we talked about that in our lessons that we learn about love episode, how a lot of great relationships that we know started with friendship. But I think the shift maybe in this technology and the way our world works now makes that part harder, because if you're not organically meeting people at work or in other places where you already kind of see how they relate to other people. You might have a friendship. You got so much more work to do to get to know who that person really is.
Yeah.
If you've met them from a picture online and then you meet, and I know a lot of people who've met their significant other online and they're wonderful
Amazing.
relationships.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that the path to get there to knowing who that person is looks different.
Yeah, for me, it feels like the word that comes to mind while you're talking is pressure. Now it feels like, oh, I have this one opportunity or these few people and I have to make it work. I don't know. Pressure feels like the difference that's happened interpersonally between in-person dating to technological dating.
Right. And the other difference too is that you present yourself then, in the way that you want to before you meet the person. So
Wait, you mean people don't use their real pictures?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh.
I don't, probably the best picture they can find. And so you present yourself however you want, the best things that you want to put forward.
Yeah.
And then when you meet somebody in person, you've got to kind of dig through and figure out what's reality. And that may take some time, and that, I don't know. I think it's better the slower way to kind of get to know somebody first, if that's possible, and see the way they interact with other friends in the room when it's not just one-on-one. There's a group situation.
This one feels harder as we're talking about it because I think it has a weight of it's really important in terms of social interaction. And this one's right there at the heart of it, of what we've been talking about.
It's also harder for us to dig through because we didn't really live through it.
Yeah, we have no idea what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Other than witnessing this generation going through this and
hearing other people's stories and how hard it is really to meet people in a really authentic way.
Yeah, because the friendship part that you do in person when we were navigating that in the way back time, that now you're doing that after you meet, and there's kind of a pressure of, are we moving from this or not? And if it doesn't work out, I got to start that all over again. And there's an exhaustion to it.
Yeah.
From the outside. If you feel differently on the inside, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your dating stories and any tips about great ways to meet friends and
technologically assisted.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, but we are glad that we're done with that.
Yeah. Let's go on to the next one. This one I think is really interesting because it's also a pretty big part of, like, when I was getting to know you in our early married life, you did a lot of this photography.
I did a lot of this.
Yeah, you had a class in college in photography. You were working in I learned about dark rooms from you and chemicals and one of the most difficult times was when you took me down into Chicago and I had to be a model for you, hiding behind flower pots, and it was black and white assignment. It's not a core memory for you.
No,
it's a core
really
memory
not.
for me.
I'm looking at him like, I don't know. I don't remember this. I do remember being in the photography class and taking you downtown Chicago because my final project, I was taking photos in the city. And I don't remember you hiding anywhere.
No, we were on Michigan Avenue and those big flower pots. You're like, get behind that and lean across from it. And
I think you're making this up.
No.
But yeah.
You were behind the camera.
Yeah. So so
film,
I forgot where we're going with this whole thing now. I'm trying to
camera versus digital art. And, so like back in the day, there was cameras where you had to learn about the f-stops and you had to actually have film and a different speed film for the shutter. And I don't know, I'm beyond my capacity here, but those are things I learned from you.
Yeah. Just generally to take photos, for those of you who've never taken a photo with anything but your smartphone, first of all, you're really fortunate. The smartphones do a really great job. But when we had our first babies, and the grandparents would want photos of them, I try to explain to people now that the process of getting photos to send to the grandparents was quite expensive and lengthy. It just everything was slower. So you would take the photo with your camera that had a roll of film and that was a skill in itself of unwinding, feeding that film into the teeth and winding it in so that it properly advanced and, the shutter would hit the right spot on the film. And so and usually you'd get a roll of film that had 24 exposures, sometimes a 36, and then you'd first of all, however long it took you to take the 24 pictures, you'd wait until that roll was finished.
Yep.
And then you'd take it to a film developer to develop that film. And that might take a week or whatever. So you'd drop it off. And if you were me and you were a young mom and you wanted to send pictures of the babies to both sets of grandparents in different states, you'd order doubles.
Yep.
So you could order doubles of the 24 pictures.
Twice as expensive.
And then after the week or whatever it took to develop it, you'd come back and pick up your printed photos that you'd pay for. And sometimes out of the 24 exposures, maybe 4 of them would be good. And you paid for doubles of 24 photos, and then you'd put them in an envelope and put a stamp on them and send them to the grandparents. And so by that time, the child was a lot older.
That's right. And we've taken a lot more pictures that we need developed. And
yes.
Yeah. And the not knowing, like you snap, it's a birthday party. Is that gonna be in focus or out of focus? Is that gonna work? Did I get cut the top of the kid's head off? You don't know until it's developed.
No.
Later.
No.
And then that memory is gone.
Right. Yeah. It's the delayed gratification. Again, a lot of this is just about how long things took before things changed. But it was nice when things went to digital, but it also changed how do we store those things. We don't have to go get them printed. So a lot of things just live on hard drives or in different places on phones. Versus
our hard drive is our attic with boxes and boxes of pictures.
Oh my goodness. Do I have a project someday? I've got, I don't know how many shoe boxes full of printed photos from the 1990s.
Are by years, though.
I have done some preliminary organizing, but it's still going to take so much work to pare those down, throw out
Yeah. But there is part that I like about that. I'm the family historian. And so I like the legacy of hard copy pictures to tell the story of the generations, because I worry about the digital footprint and memories of how they feel more fleeting. So I think about a relative of ours that has died recently, and it's hard to get onto their phone or to get the digital photos, and not even knowing what's there, let alone having a photo album or a box of photos to go through for a family history purpose.
Because in theory, you can preserve those photos better, but how do you find them and pass them along?
Yeah.
So like with our grandparents, everybody had albums that they would save the printed photos in. And so you'd be able to say, hey, here's my wedding album. I do have my parents' wedding album, and the pictures are there. Now we can take them out and scan them and preserve them digitally. But it was easy to just pass on it. Your grandmother had tons of albums, and they were all meticulously
labeled,
captioned, and with the who was in them and the year, and with the little corners that you'd put the photos into, those little, like you'd slide them into the corner holders.
Yeah. Grandma was a great archivist and so helpful, but I'm not sure what that looks like for our most of our pictures are on our phones, so who's going to know who the people are in there, because they're not annotated?
Yeah, they're just who knows what. And the benefit is that they're so instant and they're really good quality now. The smartphones can take great quality pictures, but the storage and the labeling and the passing them on is hard. And the funny thing that I find just so funny is I found out from our daughter recently that she has got this app, I think it's called Lapse, that actually intentionally makes you wait for the photo. So it tries to, I know, isn't it fun? Like now they have these instant photos, but they're trying to, I admire it in a way that I see this generation doesn't know what it's like to wait for things.
Yeah.
I even had one of our kids tell us once, like they had a disposable camera that they brought to some important event or trip. And I said, why do you have, like, those take crappy pictures. You can't tell what they are. And they said, oh, but don't you know, it's so fun to wait and get it developed. And we're laughing like, fun?
You know?
But I think they miss that in a way, that anticipation of you don't know what it's going to look like. And you get this thing to wait for. And so there's ways to recreate that. And this app, I think it's so in the description. I was looking it up because I had never heard of it.
Yeah.
And in their description, it's called an invite-only disposable camera, allowing you to snap quick disposable camera-style photos. I think they even put like a vintage-y filter sort of on it, so it looks
the
old.
washed-out colors.
Right. And then you wait till they, quote-unquote develop. You don't get instant access. And it says that this format is supposed to prompt authenticity in social media as the photos are unedited.
Oh.
So I found that interesting too, because thinking about this, I didn't really think about how just the ability to edit everything has also changed our social dynamics.
Definitely. I've seen a commercial where there's these kids making faces, having a camera picture taken, and it's for AI. And then something happens, and then they're all smiling, looking forward. Remember how hard it was to take a picture of all of our kids, getting everybody to look? Now you can edit the photo to have everybody looking forward, even though, people were screwing up their faces or picking their noses, and now it's a perfect family picture.
It used to be you could believe what you saw.
Yeah.
And now it feels like, what has that done to just trust?
Yeah.
And
well, and what's truth, what's real, thinking about relationships of whether it's what pictures you post or how you frame it, right? You can cut out things, you can move people out of the picture. And so what are we talking about in terms of truth, reality, and how we interact with it? I was just talking in class today of thinking about truth as my truth, versus a capital T truth, and the implications relationally that are built into that. I think we're seeing that in photos of like, this is what I want to be real, even though the parent or the picture was a mess. I can edit it to look perfect. And I think it also puts pressure on others observing that, because it's like, oh, Tara has it all together, because every picture is perfect. And my life isn't that way, and I forget that maybe that's not truth that I'm seeing.
Right. And we can present ourselves that way in social media and things. And and then what do you believe when you see a picture? You could put somebody in it who wasn't even there.
Yeah.
And how do you believe it? So I think, it's complicated things a bit.
It has.
Socially, because you could also, you could misrepresent the truth. And so I find it charming that kids are trying to go backwards to a more authentic and slower time.
Yeah. And there's that other one you and Annika do all the time. Be real.
Be real.
Yeah. Which kind of strips away the fake, making it look really good. And it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to take a picture now.
Yeah.
Oh, what is Be Real, by the way?
So I think it's with a similar intention. It's an app that it notifies you have to take a picture of yourself now and where you are. So you just take a picture wherever you are, and it posts, and whoever you're friends with on the app, you see where they are. So it's kind of interesting to do that with my child and see a little slice of her day. Like, oh, she's in class right now and taking a picture, or she's out grocery shopping with friends, and you don't get to edit the photo. So it is, the intention, I think, is to show a slice of real life and lash back against all the edited unreality. Because
it's taking a selfie, and it also takes the picture the opposite direction of the selfie of what context you're in. So you have your face, and then you have the context that you're in. It's interesting, because back when I was doing research with juvenile delinquency in Georgia, one of the things that predicted a decrease in likelihood of misbehavior is parents and adolescents knowing where each other are at different times, or knowing schedule, kind of involvement. And this is kind of a use of technology towards that, of like, it's random times that it comes up, and you get to kind of see a slice of life that leads to a type of intimacy that's kind of curated by technology, but it's better than some of the other things, which I like. Yeah. All right. Banking. I have nothing.
That sounds so boring.
Yeah. I don't know about this, because I'm still trying to figure out money.
Yeah, I know. But it's an everyday thing that everybody has to deal with at some point. At some point, everybody has a job. How do you deposit the money that you receive? How do you pay friends when you go out to dinner and split a check? I mean, it sounds like it's not that big of a deal of a thing, but I think it's changed things relationally.
Yeah.
And just being able to count personally. Because I remember my first paychecks that I proudly walked into the bank and, put the check on the counter and they would deposit into your account. And I think there were ATMs at that time, but I didn't trust it going into this machine. I wanted to hand it to a person who would put it in my account, like I had my own personal vault or something. But I think there were a lot more personal interactions, even with people in the service industry.
Yeah.
But in banking in particular, you had to have interaction. Even with the drive-through banking, there would be a teller in the window, and you'd put it in this little.
I love
do you remember that?
Yeah. The vacuum tube or
I love that.
was.
It was kind of freaky, but you would take this little cylinder out of a machine, and you'd put your money in it, even if it was like cash.
Yeah.
And then you'd close it. You'd put it, and this tube had suction, and it would it would just go. It would just disappear, and you'd see the teller on the other side open it, and they could talk to you through a microphone.
Yeah, that was fast. I thought that was like the Jetsons. I
That
thought
was
it was
fun.
Amazing technology.
I would go to that with the kids for entertainment, and then they would send their receipt back with and with lollipops for the kids. So they'd be sitting in the back of the seat, like they couldn't wait to go to the bank because the teller gave them all a little candy.
Yep. And now we have digital payment and like pictures. I'm still fascinated. I don't know how money gets deposited
What is
because
money?
you take a picture of it. Oh no, let's not get into what is money.
I mean, because even just the tangible part of cash flowing through your hand, we don't even use cash as often. So it's just this theoretical thing. You're tapping a plastic card or your phone, since you've learned how to do that.
Yeah,
and it just disappears from your checking account. So you're really not interacting with that flow. And also when you used to deposit checks or withdraw money, I remember learning how to balance a checkbook, where you would write down every time you deposited money, you'd write down the exact amount, and you'd have to do the addition or subtraction. And so the math part was involved with the interaction. And I remember my parents and my friends' parents, that was a big part of your first job. They'd sit you down and teach you how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder, so as you're talking, I'm thinking, about child development, our ability to think concretely versus abstractly, of like, early on, we had to handle money. There was a concrete kind of connection. I had physical money. I understood I had $3 and I would give $2. I'd get something. I'd have $1 left. Now it's all theoretical, or it's all abstract. It's not concrete. And I wonder how that affects how we think about money, how we learn when we're young. It's a little bit harder. You can't think abstractly. And so then the value of money shifts.
Absolutely.
Anyway, that's a weird thought.
No, but I mean, I think that's part of it, is just the loss of that tangible
piggy bank of saving coins to see them build up so that you could use it for something later.
I hope kids still do that.
Yeah.
I think our kids had those.
We tried those three kind of 3-part ones where you save, you spend, and you give to God, and they could save money in different ways.
Yeah, and then you could see how much was in there, and you could see, your efforts.
Yeah, and now it's kind of digital.
Yeah. Yeah. So like interaction wise too, I remember when you'd go out to dinner with friends and you'd split the bill. They'd give you one bill, and you'd have to do math to figure out who owes what, and then pass money to each other and make change and all that stuff. And now you've got Venmo, and you just say, it splits it for you.
That's
and you
right.
just.
Well, last thing relationally, navigation.
Yeah. And we love travel, so we love this one. We're going to end with this one, but I think this one's changed a lot of things.
Yeah.
In our world and in the world, and also if we're speaking about money as a tangible thing, now we're talking about navigation as far as maps and finding your way somewhere, somebody giving you directions, and having gone from people verbally giving you directions, like this is how to find my house. You turn at the 7-Eleven, and then to the maps, the folded maps, or the Rand McNally that we love to have in our car. to the GPS that nobody ever even gives you directions anymore because they assume you're just going to plug it in.
Yep. You have the address, you plug it in, you find your way. And people following GPS never end up going in the wrong direction or ending in a lake or anything. So I think there's a loss of being able, again, to interact with the environment and use logic to navigate things where we trust technology, which is great. And it does streamline things and makes it easier. And yet we're not able to think or interact with our environment in a way that decreases our relationship with the areas around us as well as the people around us.
Yeah.
Driving, I would have you have the map, or I would have the map and you'd be driving, and we'd have a conversation of like, oh, I think exit 57 is where we can get gas and a Subway or whatever food place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's a big thing that we've lost, is that relationship with our context, because I trust my GPS now too. And I've had a couple times where it stopped working.
Yeah, especially in the city, right?
Right. If I'm coming back from a birth in the city and, the big buildings are interfering with my
you're on
connection.
Lower Wacker.
Yeah. I'm suddenly terrified because my map is gone. I don't really know. I've forgotten how to feel my way home. I remember that being kind of a skill and a victory when you get a little bit lost or make a wrong turn. And then you just kind of look around and you remember certain things and you make a few more wrong turns and then you see something that's familiar and you learn a lot along the way and you gain confidence in looking for clues and you find your way home. And we don't really have the need to do that very often. So when it happens, it's really scary.
Yeah. Because you don't hear recalculating. It's just you have to recalculate of where am I positioned, how I get here, how do I get to the next place, and it's challenging.
And stopping. So it's notorious. Men are notorious for not stopping and asking for directions, but you're actually really good at that.
Okay. I gave her a surprise face. I'm like,
I was starting with men in general, but you actually have before we had GPS and we had the maps. Sometimes they weren't specific enough, and we'd get turned around, and you were always pretty quick to stop and walk into a gas station or something and ask for directions. I don't think that happens much either. And sometimes it would end up in an interesting conversation, and they'd say, hey, while you're in this neighborhood, why don't you try that coffee shop down there?
We'd find a lot of fun, unique things that we would bypass if we hadn't, one, gotten lost, and two, interacted with people. And so again, there's some benefits and some downsides to both, but I think the piece we're talking about is how do we intentionally use the technology that we have. Maps were technology back in our day, and now it's GPS. How do we use that towards connection, awareness, interaction with our environment, and maybe slowing down rather than faster, quicker, more efficient? Getting lost a little bit might be helpful.
Yeah, I know we don't like getting lost, and we do like a road trip, and I would love to take a road trip and just go back to using our Rand McNally, but we love to see exactly what time we're going to arrive somewhere and then trying to beat that time. Yeah. This is the problem. Our competitiveness doesn't allow us to just enjoy the journey that much anymore, and I think that's what we're talking about with all of these things, is remembering that we can slow down, maybe sometimes enjoying the benefits of our advances in technology, but also trying to put it away sometimes.
Yeah, and not always have to use what is available.
Right. Read a map, get lost.
That's right. Write a note.
Write a letter.
Use a landline. Do collect calls. Try living in the 60s and 70s occasionally, as well as in the 21st century.
Yeah. Well, we hope you'll enjoy slowing down and maybe
getting lost.
Yeah.
And enjoying,
but not too lost.
And enjoying the relationships along the way.
All right. Thanks for joining us.